Welcome to another edition of the Here We Go podcast. I am your host, Trent Gang, and today I'm going to be talking about the case for the Pittsburgh Steelers to take a wide receiver in round one. So I know that's going to be a little controversial considering I just did an episode about what the Pittsburgh Steelers should have learned from the Philadelphia Eagles win in the Super Bowl, and that's about winning the trenches. But one of the things that I'm going to make a case for is going to involve them making no moves in free agency at the wide receiver position, or even if they bring in one veteran and assuming they're going to trade George Pickens, you still need another guy. So in my opinion, I would only take a wide receiver in the first round if his name is Emeka Egbuka. Okay, so first of all, you can start with the Ohio State homerism. Yep, sure, it's on there. It's on my shirt. So, but that it goes so much deeper than that, in my opinion. For me, it's more about the fact that this team needs a character change in the wide receiver room. We have not had a wide receiver who can be a high end, and I get the arguments of people saying he's a wide receiver 2 in this league. That's okay. If you have a high-end wide receiver 2 for 10 years, it's not a wasted draft pick. So there's a narrative about, oh, well, he's not a true number 1. Well, guess what? Most of these guys aren't a true number 1 unless you're drafting them pretty high up in the draft. So, yeah, we got George Pickens in the second round. You know why? Because he came with 1,000 red flags, and all of them have come true. To the point to where we're not even sure if this guy's going to be on the team next year. Those guys typically aren't laying around in the rough. As a matter of fact, Colin and I did an episode last year at the beginning, before the season even started, about how effective are the Steelers actually at drafting wide receivers. Is it more myth or is it actual fact? And what we found is they missed on way more than they actually hit on. So you can't just go digging around in the second and third round for wide receivers and expect to hit on a good number of those guys, because typically they don't always work out. So you can go to the one-offs and say, oh, well, the Rams found Puka Nacua clear back in the fifth or sixth round, whatever round he came out of. Sure, the anomalies are always going to be out there. But the overwhelming majority is not going to be a high-end wide receiver 2 in the NFL for a long time. And you can pretty much guarantee that Emeka Egbuka is going to be a high-end wide receiver 2 in this league for a long time. As long as he stays healthy, it's there. Not only is he a guy who is a bigger build for a wide receiver, he's about 6'1", roughly 215, somewhere in that ballpark, 205, 215, somewhere in that ballpark. I don't know where he's actually going to show up at the combine with his actual measurements. But he runs about a 4.3, 4.4, somewhere in that ballpark. He's got a lot more speed than I think people realize. Reminds me a lot of Chris Olave in that way. It's where he's just so smooth in the way that he operates that he doesn't look like he's moving that fast, but he actually is a lot quicker than he looks. And I think that he's a fantastic blocker. He's a very unselfish player. And I think it was the Tennessee game in the playoff. He went up to Ryan Day during a timeout. And he told Ryan Day, he said, hey, if we run this play and I run this route, Jeremiah Smith's going to be open over the top because I'm going to suck in the defense to me. Jeremiah Smith's going to run behind me and score a touchdown. That's exactly what happened. They ran that exact play that he called for. He did draw the coverage, and Jeremiah Smith broke right behind him for a touchdown. That's the attitude and the kind of team-first type player you need on the Pittsburgh Steelers, and a guy we haven't seen in, quite frankly, a really, really long time. We need more of that type of attitude. We need more of the championship pedigree. He just won a national title. They've been in the running for it. Like, he is a very good player, and I'll take him any day of the week. I don't care if it's the first round. I don't care if it's the second round. Whatever round you can get this guy in, I would take him in a heartbeat. I would sprint to the podium the second we're on the clock and he's still available. He's just got the right type of attitude. And I think that you need a guy like that in this locker room in this day and age. And we really haven't had a guy who's got that kind of attitude since Hines Ward left. So to me, he makes a ton of sense. And I know, like, it, you know, if Tetro of McMillan falls, then of course, like, he's a no-brainer. But that dude's not going to fall. Like, he's going to go early. He's going to go somewhere inside the top 10. And I will completely understand the argument for defensive line. And I would probably 9 out of 10 drafts say to take defensive line as well, because we definitely need to rebuild the defensive line. I mean, we saw what happened with Derrick Henry, ran all over us. We saw the way that the Philadelphia Eagles basically just manhandled the Kansas City Chiefs in the Super Bowl. It was all done through the trenches. And so I would be totally on board. And I'm not going to be mad at all if they end up drafting a defensive line in round 1. Two things here, though. I don't think this is a very deep draft at wide receiver. I think if you pass in the first round, it's a significant downgrade between round 1 and round 2. I think it's a deeper downgrade between round 2 and round 3. And I'm not sure that any of these guys in round 2 or 3 are going to be ready-made starters. I mean, I'm not sold on a lot of them. There's guys I like. I mean, Higgins is a nice guy, and Royals is a name that keeps getting brought up in rounds 3. Trey Harris, like, I think that guy's going to fall. I think that guy's probably going to fall into the 3rd round. If he doesn't test, like, extremely well in the combine, I feel like that dude's going to fall, because he's definitely not a ready-made prospect either. So, I mean, you can get probably guys that are nice role players, and they might fit in Arthur Smith's offense. I know Jack Besh gets thrown around there quite a bit as another prospect, probably in the 3rd round, who could be somebody who really fits in this offense. Big body guy, very strong, physical guy. If I have an opportunity to draft Emeka Egbuka, I'm taking him. And the other piece to this is you can still get your defensive line taken care of in the rounds 2, round 3, round 4, round 5. I mean, this is a super, super deep defensive line draft. I still think they could double up on defensive line in this draft. I don't know if that's 100% going to happen, because I really think that this team is probably going to search somebody out in free agency. Mike Tomlin's not a huge fan of playing a ton of rookies. He doesn't like playing rookies at all unless they've, like, far outplayed the guys ahead of them. So I don't know that he's going to want to go that route. I feel like they should go that route. They really need to get younger on the defensive line. You need to have a guy who can come in, be a starter. And if I had my way, it'd be a nose tackle where you move Benton over to the 3 tech, and you need a backup for Cam Hayward. We don't have that right now. We just don't. DeMarvin Leal's going to be back, but in what shape is he going to be in with that neck injury? Is he going to be the guy that we saw in training camp this year, or is he going to be the guy we saw in training camp the year before? You know, who's going to show up? We don't know. So I definitely still feel like there needs to be 2 defensive linemen taken in this draft, and that's realistic. One needs to be a defensive tackle. One needs to be a nose tackle. That's how I would attack it. And I think that if you had a choice between a guy like Kenneth Grant or Emeka Egbuka, and they took Grant, I'm not going to be upset. I mean, Grant's a fantastic player, and he actually provides a bit of pass rush from that nose tackle position. So, you know, that there's a lot to go around with this conversation to say, like, you know, what happens between now and the draft, free agency wise. We'll see, you know, but I really feel like The offense needs some adults in the room, and even though he would come in as a rookie, Emeka Egbuka is a guy who would be the adult in the room, and I think that guy would be somebody that you can rely on for a really long time to be a really good production wide receiver in any offense. It doesn't matter if it's Arthur Smith's offense. It doesn't matter if we ran a Mike Shanahan offense, if we had a Sean McVay offense. Like, this guy could play in any system, and there's such a stigma about him being a slot receiver that I don't quite understand. He played more in the slot this year because they had two very young up-and-coming receivers who were both going to be stars in their own making. Jeremiah Smith's the best receiver in college football this year. He's probably the best overall player in college football this year, if we're being completely honest. I mean, the kid was an absolute freak. I don't know if I've seen a prospect like him. Definitely not at 18 years old. I mean, he's just a dominant player. Carnell Tate is another guy. He was a top wide receiver recruit in his class coming in here. And you're going to try to get those guys on the field. And to me, Egbuka moving into the slot as a more of a full-time role this year goes a long way to say that he's a team first guy, not necessarily that he's a slot player. It's just he's capable of doing it. He's a good fit there. And you know what? If Pittsburgh got a free agent wide receiver and drafted Emeka Egbuka, guess what? I don't care who we drafted last year. I don't care if Calvin Austin's there. I don't care if Roman Wilson's there. I'm fine with moving him in the slot because he's capable. He's a versatile player. And we talk so much about how Mike Tomlin loves versatile guys. He's a versatile guy. Go get him. I just think it makes a ton of sense, both for the organization. He's a very, very good blocker. He's not underrated at all as a blocker. He's very well known to be a blocker. I think Steeler fans who got so mad about watching George Pickens just stand there and not block anybody would be really, really happy with the effort you see out of Emeka Egbuka. He's a phenomenal blocker. He will block at the line of scrimmage. He'll be blocking 40 yards downfield. He does not quit. He does not stop until the whistle blows. I mean, we need guys who are going to come in here and play, and they're going to try to win, and they're going to win at all costs. That was what Hines Ward was when we loved Juju Smith-Schuster early in his career. That's what he was. You know, you fall in love with these guys as fans, and I think this fan base would fall in love with him very quickly. Now I'll say this: if he's not on the board, I don't care if Luther Burden's there. I don't care if Matthew Golden's there. I'm not drafting a wide receiver outside of him unless it's Tetro McMillan. I mean, he's the only other guy that I would think about taking in this draft. So, you know, if neither of those guys are there, then absolutely go defensive line in that scenario, and then look for a guy like Kenneth Grant or you know, Derek Harmon, Tyleik Williams. I don't know, whoever you want to go after in that scenario. I mean, if Walter Nolan's still there, absolutely go after that guy. That kid's going to be super talented. I think he'd be a really good player regardless. So, you know, there's a ton of guys you could go after outside of the wide receiver position. For me, it's Emeka Egbuka or bust if you're going to go wide receiver. And so if he's there, I'm definitely running the card to the podium. If he's not there, then I'd move completely away from wide receiver altogether. And I might move away from wide receiver for like a couple of rounds. But you better get a free agent. You cannot go into a season with a guy like Van Jefferson again. You know, that's where kind of my Darius Slayton arguments kind of come in. As I really like Darius Slayton, and I would go get that guy. I think he's underrated. I think his game translates to Pittsburgh pretty well. He's a guy who hasn't been overly upset about the fact that he's not gotten the ball a ton, being in that New York Giants just god-awful offense. But he would produce here. He's got some speed. He can take the top off. He's a pretty decent build guy himself. He and Emeka Egbuka are probably built very similarly, actually. Probably a lot of same speed. He does have some drop issues here and there, but I just think that if you're not going to go after a guy like Emeka Egbuka, then I definitely go defensive line. And I think you build this thing out kind of like how the Eagles did, build through the trenches. If Egbuka's there, I'm okay taking the receiver number one, though. And I know a lot of people aren't leaning that way right now because of what we saw in the Super Bowl. I think there's some people who are kind of given that, like, snap reaction to, what we've just seen. And there's some other people that just genuinely, that's how they feel, is they should go in the trenches, should completely ignore all the skill positions until they've built the trenches out. And I can understand that argument as well. So I don't think there's a wrong way to do this, if we're being perfectly honest. If I have my preference, again, I'm going to go with the wide receiver if it's Emeka Egbuka, simply because we definitely need an upgrade there. It's no secret. It's been awful to watch all year. And you absolutely need a guy who's got some character in that wide receiver room again. And I think that's going to go a long way towards not only whatever quarterback we're going to have in 2025. I still believe it's Justin Fields, but if it's not Justin Fields, it's going to go a long way towards whatever quarterback we're looking at. If it's Russell Wilson, if I really, God, I hope it's not, but if it's Aaron Rodgers, if it's Kirk Cousins, I don't want him either. If you draft a guy like Emeka Egbuka, does the Matthew Stafford trade now become a little more enticing? I don't know. I don't know if any of that stuff is going to make any difference to these guys, but they'd much rather play with a guy like Emeka Egbuka than George Pickens in some regards. Yeah, they want the Pickens talent, but no one wants to deal with the attitude issues. No one wants to be a quarterback who's trying to throw a ball and you have no clue if that guy's going to run a full route or if he's just going to stop and quit on you. And that's kind of where a lot of these guys are going to be in situations of making the decision to come to Pittsburgh. Doesn't make sense to them? Something to think about, right? I mean, we can't take it for granted that George is just going to run every play hard, because he doesn't. And no quarterback's going to, I mean, they have to play with enough anticipation in this league. Their job is hard enough. They don't need to guess whether or not the receivers are running routes. And with a guy like Egbuka, you don't guess. With a guy like Darius Slayton, you don't guess. Even if they would trade for a guy like Debo, he does play hard. You're not going to guess. George Pickens, you have no clue what's going to happen on one player or the next. He can be totally engaged one game. He can be totally engaged in one play. Next play, something doesn't go his way, it's over. So we need to start turning around the character inside the organization. We need to quit taking chances on these red flag guys. We need to start getting back to building a team the way that we used to build a team, with unselfish guys who have talent, even if it's not the top tier talent, and they want to win at all costs. That's what we need. So I again, if it's not Emeka Egbuka, I don't care if it's Matthew Golden. Yes, Matthew Golden absolutely has a higher ceiling. 100%. He's got a higher ceiling than Egbuka. He's also got a lower floor. The guy's not produced nearly as much as Emeka Egbuka in college. He's come on a lot this year. Super talented kid. I mean, he's drawn a lot of comparisons to Amon-Ra St. Brown. So is Egbuka. I actually think the comparison to Amon-Ra fits Golden better, but I'm not going that route. If you're not getting the guy who truly fits your offense now, which Egbuka does, and I don't think Golden does as much, I'm just going to go ahead and take the defensive line. That's just kind of where I'm at. So I think it makes sense. Maybe people don't agree with that, but there's a ton of options in this draft, because some of the needs that we really have with running back, with defensive line, these drafts are so deep for these guys in both of those positions that we need to attack some of these other positions within free agency. That way we have plenty of room to get a luxury pick like an Emeka Egbuka round one. So we'll see what happens in free agency between now and the NFL draft, because that's going to go a long way to determining, does the wide receiver make sense in round one? If we got a guy like Darius Slayton and there's no intention of trading George Pickens, then I kind of move away from the fact that maybe we don't want to go with Emeka Egbuka. If we have to trade a pick to get a guy like a Deebo Samuel, or if they try to trade a pick for a guy like Cooper Kupp, which I don't think either of those guys should garner much. I mean, fourth, fifth, or probably fifth round. I would go a fifth round for each of those guys. I don't even know if I'd go a fourth round for Deebo. It still changes the dynamics of the needs. And so that probably moves my mindset a little bit. So we'll see how this goes. But let me know what you guys think. Does this make any sense to you? Does it change kind kind of where your thinking's at as far as wanting to go defensive line first, because I think the majority of people want the defensive line right now from what I've seen on X. Let me know what you think. As always, like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. Looking to put a show together with Alan Saunders here soon, trying to finalize some details on that, so keep posted. Have a great night.